if you ever had a point where you were playing World of Warcraft and you were mostly going to pugs for a little while and they're ran by different people, you'd probably realize that there's these strategies that are kind of like pug strategies that people expect to be done when they're in a certain type of group. And maybe you've even had the experience before where you see that within a pug, the raid leader's trying to get the group to do a different strategy, maybe one that you've seen before in a more organized group, and then people will push back on it and be like, oh, why are we doing it this way? They'll think that, of course, since it's not the prefab kind of like templated strategy that people use in this situation, that it must be completely wrong or stupid, or there's no way that there's any value it could possibly add. I think a big example of this could be if you ever have done BWL pugs, and people will think that where you tank Firemaw is incredibly important, that it's just the biggest deal ever, when you really think about the boss conceptually, it doesn't matter. You simply can tank them anywhere where the healers are able to be out of LOS while having line of sight of the DPS and the tanks. And as long as you achieve that goal, nothing else is really material to the situation. Perhaps if you're really clever, you could find out a way where the healers can heal everybody, the DPS can hit the boss, but the tanks must be stacked on top of each other because of the geometry of the room, and then that would not make sense. But it would take quite a lot of strategy to create such a fucked situation. And yet, I've seen many times where people will just freak out about the way that Firemaw is going to be tanked. They'll be like, we're definitely going to wipe, we're not tanking it the way I've seen. I've never seen anyone tank it this way. And this behavior exists in so many places in life. I think maybe one of the more obvious places where this happens in the real world is if you had a middle class or higher income upbringing, then most likely everyone you know just kind of goes to college or goes to community college, and it's just accepted that that's a smart thing to do, and there's no real analysis that needs to be done beyond that when it comes to making the decision. It's considered entirely normal for 18-year-olds whose parents believe their kids to not truly be mature adults and that they're incapable of making decisions for themselves, such as which apartment they'll be renting when they're a sophomore or a junior and they're getting out of the dorms. They wouldn't trust their children to do that. They wouldn't trust their kids to go out for a night with their friends while they're in high school, even most likely, without the children reporting some kind of status of what's going on at some interval. Maybe it's just like, let me know at the end of the night, or, you know, call me before you drive back. Who knows? And yet they will think it's entirely normal for their kids to make basically a 7-figure financial decision when most of them have never even had a job before. And this is considered normal society over, and it's obviously insane if you think about it. It's crazy how many people have the experience of going to college and either disliking the experience and not getting a real productivity gain out of it, or disliking the experience and they do get a productivity gain out of it. But both of those are actually like pretty insane. It's a really long amount of time you're going to spend doing something. But people, I believe, are just socialized by their peers around them to accept that this is just the way things are. It makes total sense. This is also, I think, goes for education systems the world over. Not just public education systems, but all public education systems for sure, and like probably 99.9% of private education systems. Children will begin education at like the age of 6, and if they are a top 10th of a percent student, what's the result they're going to get by the time they're 18 before they go to any university type systems? They're going to know Calc 2, so they'll have done Calc 1, Calc 2, they'll have done college level chemistry, college level physics, they'll have taken 8 semesters of a language, and that would be basically you've really done it, you're a great high schooler. And this sounds, I think a lot of people be like, well, what's wrong with that? Why should a high schooler have done more than that? And, well, because it's 12 years of their fucking life, making them do something 40 hours a week plus homework. And that's just a shitty result. It's terrible. If instead someone said, I'm going to homeschool my children, and then someone was like, okay, and you just teleported 12 years in the future, and you're like, well, what did your kids learn over 12 years? And you're like, well, they learned everything you learn in the first year of an engineering degree. And it took 12 years. People, if they thought about it like that, they'd be like, okay, what the fuck's going on here? And that's how education is the entire world over. And I mean, some of it is that, kids have worse, like, brain chemistry than adults, and they are not as capable of learning certain things. I know people be like, kids are really good at learning. Kids are not as good at learning fucking like advanced math as adults. At least not most kids. But 12 years is a really long time, and it wouldn't be too nuts to think that people could learn a lot more. Or you could think of just all the downtime that's involved in school that's unproductive, or the deluge of homework and other facts that are crazy. Like how nuts is it that I personally don't know anyone that learned a language simply through their high school classes at all. Like, I know people who took Spanish and are good at Spanish. Like, my wife is good at Spanish, and she took Spanish classes in high school, and she practiced it outside of school, not all the time, but semi-frequently. I don't know anybody who's like, I just show up to class, get an A in the class, and I actually fucking know how to use the language in a way that matters at all. It basically doesn't exist. And yet, in America at least, maybe this is probably not a problem in a lot of European countries. But at least in America, it's considered totally normal. Like, yep, schools are just like, we need to have these kids learn fucking languages. And they don't. They just actually don't. And they pay teachers, not to say it's the teacher's fault, but they pay teachers to teach these kids a fucking language. None of the kids actually fucking know anything, but they're able to do some standardized tests or some kind of template test that the education system requires the teachers to deliver in the classroom. And then everybody's like, yeah, we're really fucking helping the next generation out. And it's just absolutely psychotic. And this kind of behavior of people just accepting things as the way they are, it definitely applies to WoW too. If you were thinking, I don't know, if you played in 2019, before people started getting more into parsing, and before people really started realizing how good world buffs were, because only the really serious players were actually in the know for the first few months, probably like the first 3 or 4 months of classic raiding. Most people didn't really think about getting world buffs on purpose to take into raid. People would just randomly get Ani, or if you're on Horde, you'd randomly get Rend. And then there was, of course, Songflower, which most people just wouldn't bother with. And, so it's like, all right, people just thought, yeah, why would we get these world buffs? Even though it's so obvious if you think critically about it that it's important for raid. Like, I remember realizing these buffs existed, and it's like, I'm gonna fucking have this. Like, what the hell's going on? But that wasn't considered a conventional way of thinking at the time. And also, it's silly, is at the very start of 2019, only people who were watching Scarm fucking knew what the fuck Fury Prot was. That was really not actually a very common thing at the very start of 2019. You had tons of tanks that were Prot, and people would, this is the thing that would happen. If you were tanking as Fury Prot and the healers just simply didn't heal you for 10 seconds and you died, well, they'd be like, well, of course you died. You're not deep Prot. Are you a fucking idiot? You're trying to tank the boss as Fury. And this was a opinion that most people had at the start of 2019. That's not based in reason at all. People will feel comfortable saying that. And then if you would have asked them in 2019, well, why do you think that a Prot Warrior would have actually survived that? Well, they'd be like, what are you talking about? Obviously they would. Prot Warriors use shields. And like, okay, but the Fury Prot Warrior generates more threat per damage taken than a Prot Warrior while they have a shield on. So as in, the Fury Prot Warrior can put a shield on. They will take slightly more damage than the Prot Warrior, and they'll generate much more threat. And then people be like, well, that's not the case. They have Prot talents. And you could ask them which talents. Like, how's that actually going to do it? How could you model that with math to actually explain what you're saying? And they're just not going to have any answer at all. But they'll have confidently parroted stuff because they've been socialized by their peers to think that this actually makes sense when it's fucking bananas. I kind of hate how this is just so natural, and I do it too. It's not like I mean, maybe there's some people out there that are actually free thinkers. Like, I definitely, when I came back to the game, I had a bunch of beliefs that I just picked up from other people, not from me thinking for myself, and I'm sure I have a ton of them right now about the game that I have zero awareness over. But at least with the really big decisions in life, and also I'd say like the big decisions in World of Warcraft or Raid or whatever, I'd like to think that I'm trying to look at things clearly. I wouldn't say in an unbiased way, but maybe with society at large, or I don't want to say the meta, but maybe like the meta of the average people in the game, without that really painting the picture of how to do everything. And this is something that a lot of people, I think, don't do this enough, especially when it comes to professionally in people's lives and thinking about, okay, like what's the purpose of their job for them or how to generate income. Like there's a lot of paths that you can do that most of them involve college, but not all of them, that actually will get you to a very high paying job and where you're actually on rails. You don't need to be creative to make serious fucking money, like 50, $100 an hour. There's tons of ways to do that, and none of them are actually popular with average people, which is weird because almost everybody gets their job to generate income. And most people wouldn't work their job unless it paid because they're not actually truly passionate about it. They may even be passionate about very tiny parts. Like, I think this is a common experience for you guys who are engineers. There are parts of your job, times when you're working where you get to really get in the zone, you get to do work as an individual contributor and use your mind and your skills so that way you can create things for the business. And that feels really good. But that is actually an incredibly tiny slice of an engineering job because you need to do all sorts of stuff with other people. And so it's not really like you're able to simply be in the zone doing programming all the time in a programming job. You get forced into doing shit that is not actually programming all the time, and most people hate that. Stuff like meetings, and this is just the way it is. It's something you just have to deal with, and it makes it a lot harder to enjoy what you're doing for sure. And that was most of my experience when I worked at Microsoft, was actually meetings and talking about what we're going to do. And very little of it was the fulfilling part of the job. And yet I'm sure I worked with a lot of people that if I would have asked them if they liked their jobs, they'd be like, well, yes, I do. And yet they're very concerned about getting promoted and getting more money and doing these instrumental goals to actually really push the ball forward in their lives. And then they don't realize that like them needing to get more out of it it's kind of calling to there not being enough from the job currently. They're not truly satisfied, but I think people like to tell themselves they are. Like I would say with a lot of things, I'm just never satisfied. Like I don't think I'm ever going to be satisfied with my professional success, but I'm kind of aware of that, and I know I'm kind of like chasing nothing in a way if I were to try to go get a tech job again and make the big bucks and try to, I don't know, maybe become a manager because I'm not smart enough to become a high-level independent IC in a company, at least not one that's competitive. I just like rambled so much there, but I don't know. Hopefully some of you guys feel the same way. I guess it really doesn't matter if you do or don't feel the same way, but if there's people around you that are telling you that you should do something in some particular way, and you don't think that these people are top performers in whatever domain they're trying to share their expertise in you with, you shouldn't listen to them. And I think most wisdom that's considered conventional wisdom is stupid because I don't want to listen to opinions from anybody that's at the top of the fucking bell curve for IQ. Doesn't make any sense. Like, why? Why do you want to listen to average people? Unless you want to have a very average existence, which I think you probably shouldn't be after that. But maybe I'm just a crazy person. Thanks for listening. I got a guild on Night Slayer. Hit me up in Discord if you want to raid.